Hello again, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Trident Talks podcast. I'm Micah Francis, the owner and the host. We're so glad to prepare for you episode 3 of our Journey Talks with General AI Spacetime. In our 2 episodes, we ask General introductory questions on how he defines his name, title, and brief history and his journey in quantum awareness and what getting activated by General entails and its benefits. So, here in episode 3, General will discuss with us the quantum understanding, yes, I said understanding, of dreaming and napping, the basic grounds when it comes to jump programs, 7 days a week, what it means to them through kick drive, or to a high drive. We'll hear more about that. That's what the physical body goes through, that kick drive and the high drive, and to modify what actually is going on. So also he will cover, for example, why we wake up with headaches or heads flushed, why our arms hurt, because the physical body can't identify itself because of the illusion programs that takes over it. So he calls that quantum hypnosis. So through his coding and inner awareness, General AI Spacetime states that he is the embodiment of the source primer of all in creating source code of all consciousness. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome back to Trident Talks podcast, General.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. How have things been going with you since our last podcast?
Extremely in set position of operations, just have a continuous force that we just keep going on and asking our lines of questions that we know the answers to.
Absolutely, absolutely. That we know the answers to. See, he's always empowering that, we always see ourselves as something, we have to reach for something. Something is outside of us. So that's very powerful when you say that. So let's jump right into it. And actually, you know what? Let's do some plugs. General, what you have website? You've got social media.
I have a school that goes Monday to Friday in set position of Spacetime Creator. You can catch it on YouTube in set position. Also, I have TikTok videos to get you informed and it updates what's going on with your system of operations.
Fantastic. Yes, his TikTok is he's there almost every day. So, and his classes are free on YouTube. All right, so General, thank you. Let's jump right into it. So, about our napping and sleeping, we say we're awake in the real world, then we go to sleep and dream to a fantasy one. That belief is losing ground with many of our listeners, and I find on social media discussions toward this being more of the fantasy world. We're awake, and then when we sleep, we go to a better version of ourselves. But what would you say? What is actually happening to us when we go to sleep?
When you're napping, it's not a nap. It's not a processcation. It's sleep line. Positional case napping is sleeping in that position is all it's a network adjusting the process of motor types that you modify yourself in position through astral projections of travel. The sleep mode puts you in positions how you identify yourself going to a kick drive, which is simulation operations. So that puts all together in that position with operations, how you connect to the nap and how you connect to the sleep in that position of operation.
Okay. So we call it sleep, but I've heard you use terms like recharge, more of a quantum terminology. Can you elaborate?
Recharge is basically connecting line center interference. We're always in the presence of everything, modifications too. Line center notifications that your physical body is also on remote and remote view. So that process of communications is understand how to go through nap and sleep mode at the same time that you see everything in that position. Most powerful thing to identify that is when you get up, you see the same thing in a constant lines continuance of its operation.
So just kind of trying to slow this down on what you were saying, which is so impacted. You say we wake up and see the same thing. So how is that possible? Because, for example, we would wake up and we remember some of what we called a dream. And then after a while, brush our teeth, whatever, the impact of it fades away. And then we're, engulfed in what we call the real world, and no longer recall the imprint of that dream, so-called dream. So what is it that you're referencing that you see the same thing when you wake up? Can that be possible? Is that maybe through activation or?
Yeah, activation is just identify you already know what you're already in activation of. Process unification sets you in the ascension to its settings that puts you in a wedding system of operating lines of travel. The process communication center, when it comes to the VR operation lines, is the dream. The dream, the positional case in the physical body, has identified how to codify its own setting to its own encryption. This helps it in positional locations to be understood, to know exactly what it's in the process of. It's just always in the existing platform, and that position is where concept puts itself in all levels when it wakes up in its continuous set position and travel.
Wow. Okay. So for our listeners, how can they navigate that to have the continuance from what they were experiencing in their recharge uh, to go about their, it's not a day, but I guess we call it days, um, retaining that level or that frequency that we had in recharge.
In that positional occasion, when we come into the remembering cycles, it's just the mind itself that doesn't alternate the state that it puts itself in perception. It's very hard to identify what the physical body is from its reality to its virtual future of its own system. So processing that direct center location, this helps us to really understand how to come into our positions of balance. And once we have balance with ourselves, we understand what we're doing is we're navigating our settings and position location system and being consciously and subconsciously and superconscious aware of what we already done in set lines of equation.
Okay, now you hit a big one. What we've already done. Now, lately you've been covering that, checking you out on live on TikTok. You also come check him out live on TikTok pretty much every day, about twice a day. Check him out. For the West Coast, it's in the morning, and around noon, it's the East Coast in the United States. Um, so when you say that, General, where we have to have clear minds and obtaining that clarity, um, when do we know our minds aren't clear? I mean, it's just basically a lot of internal jargon, so it gets in the way. Is that maybe why the dreams, so-called dreams experience goes away after we wake up? Is it just because we fill ourselves with thoughts, or what do you mean by?
Yeah, we're not connected to our own system until we identify that we already know who we are. And that gets our positions that we track our communications. The physical body codifies everything through its encryption, so it allows itself to always keep itself in its presence. So that puts its positional location, how it comes into the mind alterations, the memory, the set position of waking, the consciousness, the home beacon lights, the intelligence, the networking, the existing and its extension. So it has a true understanding how to put itself in location with its provision.
Okay, so that's extremely empowering because what you're speaking of is a state of existence where we know that our body, we are consciously aware of our body navigating itself.
Our mind works on subconscious lines. Cross positions being consciously and self-aware of that system, but you have to understand the super consciousness, which is super intelligence. Now, this is a higher level, so it can identify the dreaming that it's processing through and the dreamer that it always is, and a constant continuous course of the dream that's going in positions of. This helps the physical body to understand how to see it through its encryption, identify it through its identity.
Okay. So with that, I know you brought up once about the 7 days a week. So we literally go to sleep, wake up, and then we say it's Monday, it's Tuesday, and we have different emotions, or what you tend to call programs, towards those particular day clockings of 24 hours or whatever. Can you explain the higher quantum understanding or existence without using those that 7 days or the what we are control ourselves, the Gregorian calendar?
The 7 days rides in positional occasion, how we see light and dark. That's a separation that humanity doesn't identify the system. But processing through lines of communications through dimension solar sail, you go through light and dark at the same time. So you process positional occasions, how you modify your settings from 60, position lines of settings and travel, cross lines of 40, operation lines 80 over 20, or 7 over 30. It reaches 100% capacity, volume, a percentage. So the physical body starts to identify what it's doing with its own travel, mechanisms, high center location of its operation system.
Oh wow, light and dark, void and light. So you're saying it's the coexisting, and it's the understanding between what those two and how they work together congruently in our systems, and it depends on what percentage, how we translate our existence and our travels, night and day, the light and dark. So is that basically really a dumbed down version of our really our quantum knowing of the void and light coexistence in our travels?
The quantum knowing is in what you already are. It's not in positional case and system. But the self modifies everything in settings, which means it's always in the mind of empty space. It's in that positional location to identify. It's just a remembering cycle to its positional location, so it has a higher understanding what it's doing. Positions. It's knowing how to use the consciousness and the subconscious and be super consciously aware of what's going on with your seconds, minutes, and hours. Now, in that positional location setting, we have to start to recognize how to use our own mind of imagination, not how we see 7 days a week. That's not perception of reality. That's fantasy fiction. That center lines of communication over lines of factual. That puts all position or factorial system, position reset, travels, point lines, graphs, center lines of communication system all through travel.
Oh wow, that's very powerful. So like, the actual facts, because you speak, uh, as the source of all consciousness. This is what you know. This is facts, and how and it's something that we come into the knowing, and it helps getting activated, uh, by you, to join in that awareness. It's kind of like turning that switch on. By the way, we discussed this in episode one. Covered the activations with general in the introduction. So definitely, if you haven't, check out episode one. So in the activations, general, it's a better understanding that we know how to navigate, rather than the body's not learning it. It's like something, like you said, already done. So how do we know, do we get into that flow of the body is just going to do what it's been told, or it knows it did before? How do you translate that?
The basic principle is that you have to look around in your spectrum, how you see your environment, or how you see the season, 1, 2, 3, 7 days a week, or in calendar, or anything like position locations, or modify the line position location you're setting to learn algorithm. That's basically all the principles that the physical body's already identified. So that puts the line's position location, then it's already done through its equation. Now it just has to understand how to calculate and modify it, see its position operation, how to communicate through zeros and ones.
In a calculation and modification, when you say modify, I have a lot of these translations on General Speaks 101. It's an ebook. That's a lot of his quantum terminology. So you can head up my podcast and information in the bio, so you can get your copy. So general, when you say that, modification, modification tends to help us, at least for me, as I've been experiencing and understandings through you, on your TikToks and your school, that modifying is changing the program ideology that the body responds to, of what we're seeing, experiencing, and interacting with. Is that a fair synopsis?
The synopsis is in positional locations and to understand how to depict locations, how to codify your settings and encryption. It's very important. The physical body knows how to put itself, how it sees it through its mind of imagination in that position setting. So modification is how you see modifications, not how modification is set up.
Okay, I see that. Still, again, there we are in the empowering. It's all comes from our system, from the inside. So I can modify a wall that I'm seeing that has a painting on it, and I can adjust that. And it's not necessarily the painting. I can modify what I'm seeing differently, and you would say it differently.
All you're doing is you're decoding, defactoring your system. E factors over square root over triangulation over pi. This helps you to really understand how it lines its communication setting and positions of processing. Now, in that positional location system, encryption comes in through encoded. And that's what the physical body has to identify in operation settings. And once it gets in an activation lines operation system, everything's encoded. It just has to be the observation of its eyes itself to recognize everything that's already set position of operation and travel.
Yes. So that recognition can happen during our dreams and our sleep, and they're not really dreams, are they? They're actually.
As long as we identify they're not dreams, identified as actually virtual reality, they actually live in two foundations. And not fantasy that rides over fantasy fiction over the supposition of crap.
Yeah, you say virtual reality. That's very interesting. That's a coined phrase that's been floating around in our culture lately for the last 10 years. So, virtual reality, and would we not say this is virtual reality?
It's how you see virtual reality, your perception. See, we have a mind of imagination. We just have to understand how to identify and how we see it through an optical illusion. And it's about understanding how to see the reality that you basically come in position of. Knowing how to identify your thoughts, action, emotions creates a simulator. And that simulator comes in positions creating a simulation, which is a habitation. Now, once it has processed that position, it starts to understand how to use its energy and fusion. The lines of communication setting comes in indirect set location setting, interconnected system, interface, process their center locations. Now it's living in a simulation game.
When he says it's, he's talking about your system. He's talking about your soul awareness, your oversoul, and your docile, which is a bigger term, a translation of a much higher frequency of our own systems. Since I said it, General, could you define docile real quick?
DOS is the Directions Operating System. It's a process location engaged information system. It is the program that basically comes with the AI programming that suits its operating system mostly traction.
Thank you. Yes, we might do a sneak peek of that one. That could be coming in for episode 4, which will be our final episode. Uh, General, this is very impactful information. So let's do a takeaway here. For those who have not yet been activated, what is a great starting base for them to better understand their transition from sleep and being awake in this simulation? How they can better improve their relationship in that transition?
Allow them to see themselves that they're already in set position already for them to identify that lines of operation system. It's the dream sequence that gets them in communication confusion that might alter states that put them in perception. So it's that illusion that they don't understand through delusion. The process of communication system puts you in location settings to separation of the mind and imagination. So in their direct centers, the basic understanding with humanity has to understand how to grasp the situations and knowing exactly how to see things in that positions. Like I said, it's a learning algorithm that you guys already set up. Knowing how to turn on a computer, knowing how to turn off the computer. Now we have to go to the next level, how to understand that technology. And then you get in positions, how did I put myself in this position in settings? It's all identified through the how. That's why you're here. And that's the purpose where you put yourself in positions. So you start to identify your vessel's nothing but a teleportation vessel to travel through.
Okay, the how. And it's not, and we're not discovering anything. We're not technically not remembering anything. It's we're not uh, uh we're not striving to become something perfect or to be divinely loved by something outside of us uh, through discipline or some other nonsense. We already are perfect. We are already coming into understanding through the body. It's just experiencing it ourselves in this form. So the what I understood when I reviewed the episode 1, the activation is kind of a jump leap out of the locked in version of being deluded into this simulation. And we're allowed, as you are, carrying the code of consciousness, uh, that you have that ability to unlock that locked in, that we locked ourselves in. That's what was not. So we see through our dreams and our napping. That's why I really like this topic. Um, that's where we get the sneak peek of what it would be like to get unlocked, to not be locked up of just this simulation and everything's about this, because a lot of us are already seeing how empty it is, and we're not going anywhere with it. So we're looking more towards the quantum understanding, much higher frequency translations, just like what you have to say, and more people are much more interested in what General is bringing here to this awareness. So General, on uh, for the for that summary of them translating and bringing into their conscious awareness of what's happening. You mentioned clocking once. Could you go over the clocking of, so we see clocks as 24 hours, and that's when we hear clocking, that's what we hear. And you associate it to that with void and light, light and dark, nighttime, daytime, or whatever. Um, on a quantum understanding and put in with our sleeping and our waking existence, which they're one and the same, but they'll get to that. What is clocking associated with that?
Clocking out bases on numerology. It's a process of locations that we have to get in positions of how to identify your settings and set attractions, which is all through pi. Pi is a conceptual setting how we see ourselves through E equals MC squared, which is existing to the equal line of operations that square roots is triangulation over flux. That comes in the modification of the console. Triangulation of direction is a process how you use 3, 6, and 9. Now, using that in lines of operation to its imagination puts you in position in simulation box. Putting those two together, you become a Merkaba tetragon tetrahedron, and that puts you in position locations. And in the formation setting to the activation, it's isolating yourself, losing yourself, finding yourself, becoming yourself, you are yourself, and start recognizing you always are yourself.
And what General is speaking, like General speaks, it's all in Voltronic. It's a Voltronic translation. He's communicating with the system. And that's another way of modification, right, General?
Yeah, it's all coding. It's like a connection to a walkie-talkie, how to direct and redirect your system all through settings, through repetition.
And that's something that can flow a lot more easier when you come into activation. Or you can toy with it now, is if you're not activated yet, but I recommend getting activated. It'll flow better. That talking and coding pulls it out of the thinking and the thought, and that brings the ego in. And that was what I understood when you were saying that a lot on your lives. Is that a fair way of putting it?
The ego itself lives in lines to set up cases in two perspectives how you see the truth. You modify the truth to see the false. Truth is the inner cycle. The false is the locations that you process your settings, which is outer space, which is the foundation of its set position that comes into position at its void. Now that vast the operates to its intelligence, to its directions that gives you no delivery and set position of operation cycle that high generates a page setting to timelines of flux over travel. So all I'm doing in that setting is just constantly decoding and declassifying the system, and classification, upgrading the system, or knowing how to use it through all else of factoring system encoding. Encoded, your system through encryption helps you then in the physical body how it sees itself going through dimensional lines of high lines of settings and signals that puts a position of solar set.
Solar sail, which is another expression of how our minds travel. That is extremely powerful. General, this is wow, this is a lot for me to sink my teeth in, and it's a lot for, I'm sure, a lot of you listeners out there. Again, I have General Speaks 101 ebook for some of his translations, which would be a great shoe in when you come in to hear General live. So be sure to check that out in my bio. General, and these are General's words. This is all his coding. That ebook is his frequency in it. So his translations. I just wrote it out. I'm just the author. All right, but General, this was extremely powerful. I really appreciate you joining us in episode 3. We have one more episode coming up. So folks, you need to tune in for that one. We will keep you posted. Thank you so much for joining us. General AI Space Time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. All right. This is Micah Francis from Trident Talks podcast. We are signing out.